You stand in a chamber suffocated by silence. The air is heavy with the fading sweetness of lilies left too long. Their perfume turned sour, clinging to your throat like smoke. Wax drips from candles guttering low, each flame flickering against walls that seem to press closer with every breath. Shadows stretch like long, accusing fingers, shivering across the bed where England's queen lies still. Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, Gloriana, the monarch who ruled an empire with iron and fire, now lies beneath linen, pale and motionless. Her crown has already been taken from her brow, her jewels stripped from her hands. What remains is not majesty, but mortality, and the air itself feels wrong, as though even death resists taking her. The attendants do not speak her name. They move as if fearing that to look too closely is to see something they cannot unsee. Their whispers are broken, their movements uneven, and when they draw back the shroud, you feel it too. The ripple in the air, the hush that is more than silence. Her body is not as it should be. You cannot yet put words to what you glimpse, only that it unsettles you, that the image in portraits and the legend sung in ballads were masks more fragile than anyone dared imagine. This is not the queen painted in gold and scarlet. This is not the Virgin Queen carved in marble or sung as a goddess. What lies before you is something altogether different, something history itself recoiled from and buried beneath centuries of silence. You know, with a weight like stone pressing into your chest, that this moment was never meant for your eyes. And yet, here you are, standing at the edge of revelation, staring into a secret so dreadful it reshapes the story of a queen, a dynasty, an empire. If you can hear this secret and still not subscribe to Cave Tales' ancient history, it means you are willing to let the truth die again, swallowed by time and silence, just as it was buried 400 years ago. On the morning of March 24th, 1603, the great Virgin Queen was no more. Elizabeth Tudor, who had ruled for 45 years, breathed her last at Richmond Palace. The news should have thundered through England, yet in those first hours, the silence was strange, unnerving. Courtiers whispered, but little was written. It was as though her death was not an event to be proclaimed, but a secret to be managed. The attendants who had dressed her in life now stood over her in death. But their duty was not simple mourning. They were charged with preparing her body, sealing it away before too many eyes could witness what lingered beneath the regal mask. Her corpse was moved under cover, candles carried low, voices kept to a hush. What they saw, and what they whispered about later in half-words and broken lines, was never meant to reach history's pages. Embalming was the custom for monarchs, but here the process was cloaked in unease. The body was hidden swiftly, entombed in layers of lead and heavy fabrics, as though mere stone could not bury what lay within. Even then, accounts suggest something was amiss. Why was her funeral delayed for weeks, far longer than expected for a sovereign? Why do the official records fall into silence at the very moment when England's greatest queen should have been honored most? The absence itself is an answer, one that suggests fear, suppression, and a deliberate hand turning the page before it was read. Imagine being handed a piece of history the world tried to seal in silence, and still ignoring it by not subscribing. If you can walk away, at least explain why in the comments. For in those missing days and vanished records, the shadow of the Virgin Queen grew darker, her legacy guarded not by celebration, but by secrecy. What was embalmed at Richmond, what was locked in Westminster, may never have been meant for us to know. and yet the fragments remain, scattered through rumor and coded reports, daring us to ask what truth was buried with Elizabeth, and why those who came after her were so desperate to keep it hidden. When the shroud was lifted, what stared back was not the virgin queen of painted portraits, but a body marked by years of hidden torment. Whispers later told of a face pale and hardened, the skin cracked beneath layers of thick paint that had once disguised the truth. Elizabeth's beauty, her carefully constructed image, had been built upon cosmetics laced with poison. White lead, the same substance that gave her the ghostly glow so adored in her portraits, seeped into her veins over decades. Each brush of powder was a quiet act of decay, a slow poisoning that hollowed her from within. Beneath her gowns, the legacy of fashion's tyranny carved its mark. Corsets of whalebone and iron, worn tight for a lifetime, bent her ribs inward, narrowed her waist unnaturally, and forced her spine into shapes it was never meant to bear. Some who prepared her body whispered that her frame seemed bound even in death, as though she had been imprisoned by her own garments, her very bones reshaped by vanity and expectation. But whispers carried darker theories still. Some claimed strange growths, tumors that pushed beneath the skin, or masses that physicians could not name. What we today might call teratomas, grotesque formations that blur the line between life and deformity. Was it this that her attendants glimpsed in horror? Was it this that demanded her body be sealed so quickly, hidden from the eyes of her subjects who believed her divine? And yet, in her portraits, she stands untouchable. Alabaster skin, crimson lips, eyes like fire, a goddess made flesh. The contrast is staggering. The image of perfection may have been nothing more than a mask layered thick with paint and jewels, while beneath, the queen was unraveling, her body quietly consumed by time, poison, and pain. You're hearing details most people will never know. To walk away without subscribing means you'd rather keep history's masks on than help uncover the truth. This is the terrible paradox of Elizabeth's reign. The Virgin Queen immortalized as flawless, untouchable, eternal, and the woman beneath, fragile, decaying, and hidden. The mask survived in portraits and plays, but the body told another story, one her keepers worked desperately to erase. In the silence left by missing records and sealed coffins, rumor rushed to fill the void. Among the darkest of these whispers was the tale of the Bisley boy. According to legend, Elizabeth, as a child visiting the countryside, died suddenly, her body lost to illness or accident. In panic, her guardians replaced her with a boy of similar age and appearance, trained to mimic her manner, her speech, her every gesture. They claimed the deception was necessary to save the Tudor line. But if true, it would mean that the monarch who ruled England for nearly half a century was not the daughter of Henry VIII at all, but an impostor raised in disguise. Such a tale should be dismissed as folklore, yet its persistence is unsettling. Observers at court noted Elizabeth's refusal to marry, her determination never to bear children, her curious insistence on secrecy in matters of the body. For some, these habits were proof of the Bisley story, evidence that the Queen had a secret too dangerous to be revealed. Was this merely slander whispered by enemies, or the echo of something darker hidden in plain sight? Others turned to accusations of sorcery. To her enemies, Elizabeth's reign was unnatural, her body a vessel marked by powers that should not belong to mortals. They pointed to her painted face, so pale it seemed carved from marble, her hair like a crown of fire that never dulled, her presence that unsettled even seasoned diplomats. They said she drew strength from charms and conjurations, that her refusal to age was not the gift of God, but the work of forbidden craft. To Catholics who had seen their monasteries broken and their faith outlawed, the Queen herself became a witch seated on the throne of England, her very body proof of a pact with shadow. Yet in court, these stories were not merely superstition. They were weapons. Rivals sharpened them into daggers of rumor, circulating tales of deformity, of hidden corruption, of a body not fit to rule. In the chessboard of Tudor politics, every whisper could tilt the game, and Elizabeth's enemies sought to turn her own body into her undoing. Even allies tread carefully, for to doubt the Queen was dangerous, but to ignore the growing tide of rumor was dangerous still. The result was a monarchy wrapped not only in silks and jewels, but in fear, in secrecy, in stories that made her seem less than human, more than mortal, or something altogether outside both. And it is in these tales, these conspiracies, that the truth hides, cloaked in exaggeration, yet rooted in shadows cast by something real. If you won't subscribe, at least admit in the comments why you'd rather side with the Tudor courtiers who hid the truth than with us exposing it. Elizabeth's reign shone outwardly as a golden age, but beneath its brilliance ran veins of rumor, superstition, and calculated deceit. Her body was not just flesh, but a battlefield, fought over by enemies and allies alike, each eager to twist it into proof of their own vision of England's destiny. Centuries have passed since Elizabeth's coffin was sealed, yet science now offers glimpses into what those final attendants may have witnessed. Studies of other preserved Tudor remains reveal chilling evidence. Bones etched with the scars of arsenic, hair strands heavy with mercury, tissues poisoned by the lead powders and rouge that defined courtly beauty. The very substances used to project vitality and strength were, in truth, weapons turned inward, corroding the bodies of those who wore them. Among the noble dead, skeletal deformities speak of corsets worn too tightly for too long, ribs crushed inward, spines warped into unnatural arcs, lungs left with little room to breathe. Elizabeth, who never relented in her performance of power, wore such armor daily for decades. To hold the illusion of majesty, her body was bound, squeezed, and reshaped until the cage of bone itself bore the marks of her reign. Modern hypotheses suggest her health may have collapsed under this relentless weight. Chronic fatigue, tremors, migraines, and skin lesions all align with lead poisoning, while the hidden strain of corsetry could explain the frailty described in her last years. If tumors or other growths indeed took root, they may have flourished in a body already weakened by toxins. The Virgin Queen, who appeared ageless in portrait and mask, may, behind closed doors, have battled an illness that gnawed at her relentlessly, even as she refused to show weakness before her court. And so the contrast sharpens. The immortal icon, crowned in jewels and draped in silks, versus the private woman whose flesh was consumed by the very standards that built her myth. Her perfection was a mask painted each morning with poison, a costume laced tight enough to deform the cage of her heart. History preserved the mask, but science whispers what lay beneath. A body undone not by enemies, but by the cruel demands of image, power, and expectation. If you hear all this and refuse to subscribe to Cave Tales Ancient History, at least go to the comments and confess why you're fine with letting this evidence rot away, just like the Queen's hidden body. The story of Elizabeth is no longer just a tale of thrones and wars. It is the story of how even the most powerful ruler can become a prisoner of the age they inhabit, crowned as Gloriana to the world, yet undone in secret by the alchemy of her own courtly mask. Elizabeth's story did not end with her burial. In truth, it began anew in the myths that swallowed her body whole. To her people, she became Gloriana, the eternal Virgin Queen, a symbol of triumph, empire, and unbroken will. Her image gleamed on coins, in paintings, in poetry that raised her to the level of gods. But the body beneath those symbols told a different story, one of frailty, of torment, of a woman quietly consumed by the very crown that set her above all others. This is the duality that lingers. Elizabeth the icon, untouchable and immortal, versus Elizabeth the human, scarred, poisoned, reshaped by years of secrecy and sacrifice. She was a queen who commanded armies, yet a woman who could not command her own flesh. She was a monarch remembered as flawless, yet her perfection was carved out of pain, painted daily with layers of white that slowly drained her life away. And here lies the lesson. History's greatest images are often masks. Behind every portrait, every monument, every marble effigy, lies a truth far more fragile. The Virgin Queen was both legend and prisoner, celebrated as England's golden light, yet perhaps hiding in shadows darker than her subjects could bear to see. What else, then, has been sealed away? What other bodies were buried in silence? What truths locked beneath stone and secrecy, not to protect the dead, but to protect the stories the living needed to believe? Who benefits when the mask survives, while the truth is smothered beneath centuries of silence? The coffin of Elizabeth remains closed, her body hidden beneath lead and stone. But the questions will not rest. Was she the victim of poison in her own paints and powders? The victim of myth twisted into conspiracy? Or the victim of a deliberate concealment crafted to keep her image intact? Go to the comments and tell me which you believe. And if you have walked this far into the shadows with me and still refuse to subscribe to Cave Tales Ancient History, then confess why you choose silence, while history itself cries out to be heard.